I recently did a video talking about the new update and my thoughts on it. After reading some comments and just looking at the community's general consensus on the update, it seemed a lot of survivors absolutely despise this update, claiming that it's unplayable and that behavior should have never released this update. Today I'm going to be giving my own opinion on what should be changed because I feel as though a lot of these people are vastly overreacting to this update. Keep in mind, I am primarily a survivor player. However, I still play a ton of killer. I'd say 65% of the time I play survivor and 35% of the time I play killer. So I still have a decent amount of game time on both sides, and I currently have roughly 750 hours in the game. Before we even get into what I would actually change about this update, I just want to say I completely understand why survivors are unhappy with this update. It was an extremely killer-sided patch and there's no debating that. However, I think killer has needed a patch like this for a very long time. Before this patch, there is no arguing that a good team of survivors could easily stomp majority of killers, with the only exceptions really being Nurse and Blight, which I'll get into how I would balance these killers later. But I think that the people who don't think this patch was warranted or needed aren't being honest with themselves. Killer felt terrible to play before this patch, and honestly, when I first started playing Dead by Daylight, I was like hardcore killer main, but playing killer felt so bad that I just moved to survivor. So if you think this video is going to be me just shitting on the update, you are mistaken. I think majority of the changes in this update were desperately needed to make killer actually feel fun to play, and I think survivors for the most part are drastically overreacting about the amount of problems with this update. Now I'll go ahead and start on what I would change. First thing is the gen speed change. I think they went a little too far with the gen speed nerf. I would personally only make them 5 seconds longer instead of 10. In my experience, my survivor games end with like 1 or 2 gens left, so the games are actually pretty close. Just some slight tuning to the gens could help to make the games really balanced. I think behavior are really close to having the game be a perfect 50-50. I think some slight tuning to the generator speed could help move the game towards that. Also, I don't think the base kit borrowed time that they added really helped at all. Killers can just body block for 5 seconds and then hit the survivor. I would personally buff the base kit borrowed time to somewhere between 8 to 10 seconds. However, I would have the survivor collision go away during that time. So that way the killer can't body block the survivor from getting away, and also so the survivor can't body block for his teammate and allow his teammate to get away. This would solve both the issues I just mentioned. There would be no more body blocking off hook anymore. And other than that, I think all of the core gameplay changes that they made were perfectly fine. I don't think they should nerf the pallet breaking speed and especially the M1 recovery, because the M1 recovery only benefits the low tier killers while the higher tier killers don't really see a benefit since they are constantly using their power. Obviously there is an exception to this rule, which is Nurse. However, I'm going to touch on that later. Now, there is some problems when it comes to the perk changes. Me personally, I think DS got hit way too hard. DS is a perk that is integral to the game because it disincentivizes killers from tunneling. However, now DS is utterly useless. You can't make any distance against most killers when you hit them with DS. Killers like Deathslinger can just shoot you as soon as they recover from the 3-second stun and down you again. Me personally, I would revert the stun change or at least make it 4 seconds. The fact that the perk disables when the exit gates are powered is perfectly fine and is justified because it would allow for free escapes. However, the issue with the perk right now is how little distance you can make when a killer eats DS. Now, to move on from DS, contrary to most people, I actually think the Dead Hard change is perfectly fine. You can actually still get pretty good utility out of the perk in a lot of scenarios. While it is hard to get the right timing, if you can master it, the perk is actually pretty decent. I also think the Thanatophobia change they made in 6.1.2 was a terrible change and was pointless. It makes the killers that didn't get a lot of value out of Thanatophobia even worse with it, while making the 2 killers that are cracked with it, Plague and Legion, even better with the perk. So it didn't even solve the main issue. And the Medal of Man change was basically useless because your stacks will reset if you do a conspicuous action. And so pretty much, in my opinion, the entirety of the 6.1.2 patch was terrible. Anything they've added in that update was trash. There was not a single change in that update that I actually thought was a good change. However, other than those specific perks, I don't really have any issues with that side of the update. Me personally, after the most recent update, I feel the perk changes have added a lot of variety to the game and has made a lot of my games a lot more fun. I don't see the same couple perks on killer that much anymore. And not to mention, survivors have started making up their own new metas, which is really, really cool, and I like to see that. Now, in my experience after the most recent update, Nurse and Blight's problems are even more noticeable. With the recent changes, they can do way more than even a B tier killer, and I think this needs to be addressed. Me personally, I would nerf both their add-ons across the board. Their add-ons are some of the strongest in the game, and S tier killers shouldn't have overpowered add-ons on top of a really good power. Also, me personally, I think Nurse hitting you with a blink shouldn't count as an M1. This would stop Nurse from being so strong with perks like Starstruck, Sloppy Butcher, and Jolt, which a lot of nurses I go up against run. Also, my last and probably most controversial change I would make is I would make Nurse's cooldown on a missed attack significantly longer. Nurses should actually be punished for spamming their power and missing. Right now, nurses basically have their power all the time, and this would solve that issue while also adding more counterplay. I think if these 3 changes were made, Blight and Nurse would become way more manageable. I think Blight is definitely closer to being a balanced killer, whereas Nurse is just way too far over. I think if Blight just had some nerfs, like I said, to his add-ons, I think he'd be fine. And then Nurse needs way more tuning, which is why I recommended so many changes. But other than that, I think that would help solve a lot of the issues at high MMR. I still think majority of survivors are drastically overreacting about this update. The game definitely isn't unplayable, and the game feels way better than it did before the update. In my experience, I run into way more variety and perks on killers than before. Survivor is a little less so, however, there is still way more variety than before. Also, I really don't think the game is killer-sided like a lot of people claim. There is a ton of perk builds that are really good on Survivor that you can easily escape with, like this build I've been running, which consists of Deliverance to counter a killer camping me, Off the Record to stop a killer from tunneling me, Prove Thyself to help with slower gen speeds, and Unbreakable to stop myself from getting slugged. Sometimes I'll swap out Unbreakable for BT to help me save teammates in the endgame, however majority of the time I run Unbreakable. This perk build is absolutely insane. This isn't the only one out there that's really good. There are a lot of really good perk builds that will increase your escape rate, and me personally, I've been really enjoying this patch, and I think the update was needed and has been really healthy for the game. But I do understand people's frustration with this update, and I think if you just give yourself a while to adapt, a lot of you will come to enjoy the update and realize it isn't as bad as you thought. I do truly think that this update will take some time for the community to adapt to, but once we all adapt to it, we'll realize that it is way better for the game than we originally realized. Let me know your guys' thoughts in the comments down below. I want to see how you guys feel. Hopefully we can have a civil discussion in the comments, because I really enjoy debating people, especially when it comes to gaming related stuff. Leave a like if you enjoyed, leave a dislike if you didn't, and click on this video if you are at all interested. I'll see you guys in the next one. Peace.